This man right here used to supply weapons of mass destruction to a terrorist organization that killed people in a war-torn country overseas. And that all changed when one of his stolen missiles within enemy terrain had nearly destroyed him before getting taken hostage and getting brutally tormented inside a dark cave. Let's comically deep dive into how he ended grand-scale terrorism and became Iron Man. So Tony invited us on his get ready with me journey on the first day as a hostage after 3 months. Aware of Tony's fatal injuries, renowned scientist and cave bro Dr. Jensen warned Tony not to touch the wire disc that kept him alive from the devastating explosion. Soon, we all learned that the cave bros were on camera because they were one terrible decision away from being turned into Twitter hashtags. Now why must I feel bad for a billionaire who made a stupid mistake going into a country that hate-watched Americans their entire lives? Without warning, the terrorists barged into their cave, held the cave bros at gunpoint, while Dr. Jensen urged Tony to follow his lead at all costs. At that point, Tony quickly realized that the same weapons he created turned him into public enemy number one. Before long, the terrorist ringleader had one order. If Tony failed to rebuild the Jericho missile, both him and Jensen would be brutally killed. Still, Tony refused to comply, but instantly changed his mind after being tormented by them. However much, the terrorists dragged the cave bros outside the cave and stripped Tony's cloth above his head next to all his weapons. Not only was Tony amazed by how fast his weapons were retrieved by them, but felt overwhelmed by the risk of getting caught from the escaping captivity. To Tony, it almost feels like watching MJ turn into a safari brochure after putting lip gloss on a lion's face. So the cave bros played dumb and agreed to rebuild the missiles without suspicion of their hidden agenda. They both understood the memo clearly. One wrong move and it's game over. With time almost running out, we saw Tony staring at the bonfire deeply in thought until Dr. Jensen snapped him out of it. They both locked in, finessed the terrorist of all Tony's weapons, tore it all apart, and used only the most vital parts needed to assemble the Mark I suit. They both also gained an unfair advantage under heavy surveillance, as the low quality live camera footage made it hard for the terrorists to figure out Tony and Jensen's master plan from any angle. Little the terrorists knew that their eyes were useless when their minds were blind. With Jensen's guidance, Tony built the first ever mini arc reactor that could power his heart for over 10 lifetimes. Even after time lost, they both knocked multiple items of steel together from scrap to wrap up their suit. Then, they were both pinned at gunpoint by the terrorists again, as their overseer threatened to wipe Jensen out for good, until Tony saved him at the last minute. So Tony was stuck with one choice: let the terrorists kill Jensen to buy more time for an escape, or save Jensen with their deadline being cut short. As soon as Tony responded that he needed his cave roll badly, their time was cut short after the terrorists decided to let Jensen go, and both would be killed if their task was left incomplete. To Tony, it felt like his balls were being rubbed on broken glass. However little, the terrorists took matters into their own hands due to their impatience, but backfired as the door bomb exploded on them fatally after Jensen almost suited Tony up. Eventually, Jensen went against Tony's plan, picked up an AK-47, and bought extra time until he was shot by the terrorists multiple times near the cave exit. From that moment, Tony unleashed hell on the terrorists as he shot the first man and shook two more behind into reckless shooting. Tony struck the next man in front of him, followed by two more before taking a moment to breathe slowly. Mans didn't stop there, as he thumped three more men away from him until he came face to face with their overseer. And it was not easy for Tony, whose arm got stuck under a rock, while accidentally taking out one of them with a deflected headshot from his helmet. Shook by Tony's double turn, the overseer shot a missile towards Tony, who ducked and fired back completely. Tony wanted to return Jensen a favor by bringing him back to his family, but was forced to leave him behind and was advised not to waste his second chance at life. In Tony's mind, it felt like the ammo being used by Israel's weapons were on menopause. Think of how annoying it felt waiting to beat up someone you hate badly. Given this situation, the terrorists dreaded Tony's arrival before they got decked with explosives by him, only Shortly after Tony escaped captivity, he got rescued by Rhodes' troops, landed back home in a wheelchair safely, and comforted Pepper smoothly. If high-quality women cried for me the way Pepper did with Tony, I would give them the world and so much more. Unlike before, Tony urgently called for a press conference after Happy Hogan, his driver, drove him and Pepper to Burger King for a cheeseburger. This is also the first time we were introduced to his mentor, father figure, and his secret main threat, Obida Stane. To Tony, Obida had so much power over him because he was the easiest enemy to ignore. Imagine having everyone's attention with their mouths shut in one room while you're speaking. This was the case with Tony, who took responsibility for the people who were killed by his weapons, so he handed himself another mystery box. Either keep making more weapons and money without becoming Iron Man, or shut the weapons production system, lose a lot of money, then become Iron Man. As a result, he ended up shutting the weapons production system down. And this controversial decision received massive backlash by investors, the US federal government, and media. Yet, Obida suspiciously advised Tony to lay low until the chaos died off. To Tony, it's like your loved ones will let known that your broke, homeless uncle won the lotto. You know what's insane about saving someone's life when you felt scared for them, like Pepper? She helped Tony replace his rusty arc reactor with a brand new one, and their bond grew stronger. After that, Tony doubled down on his suit upgrades with Jarvis until it became functional. Prior to a huge party that nobody told Tony about, he ran a flight test, resisted Jarvis's warning of the suit incompletion, flew upwards, then free fell downwards after it froze totally. Yet, Tony's suit gas reserve tank saved Tony from getting hurt, while the surviving terrorist had reassembled his older one after they recovered its remains from the desert. And if you were Tony, what would you do if the journalist you slept with before told you that the terrorist still took all his remaining weapons without your permission? Would you let it slide just to get kicked out of your company for being untruthful, or risk saving more hostages, killing terrorists just to find the traitor? After Tony's mind was made up, he instantly found out that Obida betrayed him and scored a point on the leaderboard. Out of rage, he fired the glass walls near his warehouse downstairs, finished testing his new Mark III suit, landed safely at an Afghan village, and fought off the hostage takers. Now, picture how overwhelming it feels having multiple people point big guns at you. In Tony's position, he punched the first man, fired him off with his right palm alongside a devastating shot to the man next to him, and a final one to the third man before catching more hostages who were held at gunpoint. After that, Tony aimed at the gunmen accurately and cleanly shot them down with his mini missiles, like Drake handing sweets to minors at kindergarten after playing hopscotch with them. As their leader called for backup in his hiding spot, Tony caught him lacking and dragged him to the floor. Afterward, Tony dipped and gave hostages more space to run their fate on the 10 Rings leader. The job was not done yet, as Tony got fired by an armed tank downwards like a cute little chihuahua doing missionary with a choo-choo toy. So Tony stood back up, dodged another attack, fired back, walked off, and flew away with a point in the leaderboard. With half of them destroyed, Obida booked a top-secret first-class trip to Afghanistan with his hitmen, met with the overseer underground, saw the upgraded Mark I suit, turned his back on them, finished them off, and got penalized on the leaderboard. So how much trust do you truly have in someone you care about if you don't want your game plan to be exposed? In Tony's case, he hooked Pepper up with an earpiece that kept them both in touch while fetching classified intel on Obida at work without tipping anyone off. Pepper hesitated to follow through since Tony kept putting himself in danger, and Tony was adamant that his technology would not only protect people's lives but would shape him as a man with a warm heart. This left Obida feeling pissed over Tony and Pepper finessing him. It got worse for Obida after he found out that Tony's best scientists were unable to replicate the mini arc reactor that Tony and Yinsen built in a cave. So stealing it from Tony's chest was Obida's most desperate attempt to use the Mark I suit and gain another point in the leaderboard. For Tony, a choice had to be made: either suffer to death by cardiac arrest or power his new suit with the older, rustier mini arc reactor to kick Obida's ass. After Tony decided to power up his new suit with the older, rustier mini arc reactor, Rhodes helped him up and brought him more time to suit up. On the other end, Obida unleashed mayhem on the first agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and two other ones before Pepper ran away from him like the firstborn child, getting an ass ass whooping from their parents. So how do you escape after being cornered by a psychopath? With Pepper being stared down by Al-Baida, Tony's spirit tackled him to the highway, and the showdown between both titans kicked off. Shockingly, a Karen with her kids inside her Audi stopped in front of Al-Baida before he lifted it up against Tony, who charged his chest and key blasted him off track, saving the family from danger. The Karen drove her family off anxiously, with Tony's suit badly damaged. Al-Baida launched himself up like Jasmine Sawyers in a long jump pit, picked up a motorbike, and smacked Tony to a stationary car. Then Al-Baida punted Tony's skull like 09 Randy Orton to John Cena, picked him up, bashed him above the road, stepped on him like a roach, and launched him onto a bus with full power. Al-Baida wanted Tony gone from the leaderboard so badly that he fired a missile from the back of his suit, blowing up the bus in the process. So how do you bounce back from being beaten up like that? With Tony's suit on low battery, Tony narrowly escaped and flexed on Al-Baida with his levitation skills. Tony went, ah shit, here we go again, then flew towards the ozone layer until Al-Baida caught him in a bear hug. Tragically, the icing problem caught up to Al-Baida until Tony gonged his skull and landed above the top floor safely. As soon as Tony's suit gave up on Tony, he was caught lacking again in a bear hug by Al-Baida until his hand-to-hand combat skills gave up on him. Then the bullets that Tony fired off his left love handle to Al-Baida saved him and bought Pepper more time to rage bait the mega arc reactor. So even under pressure, Tony snuck up on Al-Baida and removed vital cords of the Mark I suit that kept it functional. Without giving up, Al-Baida fired his final attack at Tony, who hung above the glass ceiling for dear life. Pepper hesitated to pull the trigger until Tony told her to. When she did, Tony flew off and Al-Baida got right until he fell into the mega arc reactor and exploded into smithereens. Unbelievably so, Tony held a press conference where he was advised by Coulson to lie about his whereabouts on his company's biggest scandal. And Tony Stark faced the entire world at the podium and sent them all into a frenzy after he admitted that he indeed was Iron Man. This movie alone nearly broke me because I saw a man who once thought was the star the world orbited around turn himself into a gravitational axis that spun the universe in circles. He not only escaped grand-scale terrorists in captivity, but redeemed himself through his brilliance. After all, Tony no longer needed the cave, but people who never made him forget that he has a heart. Lastly, his actions remind us that embarrassment is the price to pay for success. Do it anyway, and you will create a community or a movement that makes people feel loved, seen, and connected every day. I am the Moonji, and this is Goodbye.